Emily Carter, a 35-year-old housewife living in the picturesque suburbs of Oakwood, Ohio, had spent the last decade carefully crafting what appeared to be the perfect life. She was born and raised in a neighboring town, a quiet, middle-class area where she had met and married Robert Carter, an ambitious accountant who had secured a stable job with a reputable firm in Oakwood. Together, they had built a home that was the envy of their neighborhood. Beautiful two-story house with a meticulously maintained garden, where Emily spent her days ensuring every detail was flawless. Emily's life, from the outside, seemed idyllic. She was involved in various local charities, hosted book clubs and garden parties, and had two well-behaved children, Chloe and Jack, who were excelling in their respective schools. Robert, at 38, was dedicated to his career, often working long hours to provide for his family. While his commitment to work was admirable, it left Emily feeling increasingly isolated and neglected. The emotional connection that once bound them had gradually dissipated, leaving Emily with a growing sense of emptiness. The Carters' suburban life, though outwardly perfect, was beginning to fray at the edges. Robert's long hours at work meant he was rarely present at home, and when he was preoccupied with the stresses of his job. Emily's efforts to maintain their perfect facade only deepened her sense of disconnection. Despite the orderly appearance of their life, she felt trapped in a routine that lacked the passion and excitement she craved. The isolation she felt in her own home was starting to weigh heavily on her. Enter Jake Thompson, the 18-year-old son of Lisa Thompson, who had recently moved in next door. Jake was a breath of fresh air in the neighborhood. With his youthful charm and engaging personality, he quickly became a favorite among the local residents. His mother, Lisa, was a single parent who had moved to Oakwood seeking a fresh start after a recent divorce. The Thompsons' arrival marked a significant change in the neighborhood dynamic, and Jake's presence was an unexpected catalyst for Emily. Emily first met Jake during a neighborhood barbecue hosted by Lisa. As she observed him from across the yard, she was struck by his easygoing demeanor and infectious laughter. Jake, who had recently graduated high school and was preparing to start college, had an energy and enthusiasm that contrasted sharply with the staid predictability of her daily life. Their initial interaction was casual. Brief conversation about the weather and local events. Jake's genuine interest and warm demeanor stood in stark contrast to the cold indifference Emily had become accustomed to in her interactions with Robert. As weeks passed, Emily found herself increasingly drawn to Jake. Their paths crossed often, whether during casual chats over the fence or while Jake helped Emily with some gardening tasks. His presence provided a welcome distraction from the monotony of her routine. What began as innocent conversations gradually evolved into something more intimate. Jake's compliments and attentiveness, which Emily had not experienced in years, ignited a spark she had long thought extinguished. The emotional connection between Emily and Jake deepened quickly. Jake's youth and vigor were intoxicating, offering Emily a glimpse into a world that seemed vibrant and full of possibilities. Their conversations, initially innocent and friendly, grew more personal. Jake became Emily's confidant, someone who listened without judgment and offered a sense of understanding that she had not found in her marriage. What started as a harmless friendship soon became a secret, electric flirtation. The tipping point came one summer evening when Robert, delayed by work, was expected home late. Emily, seizing the rare opportunity, invited Jake over for a casual visit. The atmosphere was light, filled with laughter and the thrill of breaking free from the constraints of her mundane life. As they sat together in her beautifully decorated living room, the air between them crackled with unspoken tension. Without the usual interruptions of daily life, Emily and Jake's connection intensified. One thing led to another, and they found themselves entangled in a passionate kiss. The realization of what they had just done hit Emily with a jolt of fear and excitement. She had crossed a line, but the thrill of the forbidden only heightened the emotional and physical allure of their relationship. The aftermath of that evening was a mix of exhilaration and anxiety. Emily was haunted by guilt but also exhilarated by the new emotional landscape Jake had introduced to her life. She found herself increasingly sneaking away to spend time with him, their relationship growing more clandestine and charged with an ever-present danger of discovery. The facade of Emily's perfect life began to crack. The more she became entangled with Jake, the more she felt the strain of hiding her affair from Robert. The once neat and orderly life she had built was becoming increasingly chaotic. Robert's occasional suspicions about Emily's behavior were dismissed with half-truths and evasive answers. The emotional strain of living a double life weighed heavily on her, but she couldn't deny the excitement and passion that Jake brought into her life. In the midst of this turmoil, the serene suburb of Oakwood continued its daily routines, blissfully unaware of the storm brewing beneath the surface. Emily's perfect world was on the brink of unraveling, with the arrival of Jake Thompson serving as the catalyst for a series of events that would shatter the illusion of her ideal life. As Emily continued to navigate the treacherous waters of her forbidden relationship, the impending disaster loomed ever closer, threatening to expose the secrets that had been carefully hidden beneath the surface. Emily Carter's life had settled into a precarious rhythm after her initial encounter with Jake Thompson. Her days were marked by a delicate balancing act, maintaining the illusion of a perfect life while secretly nurturing an affair that had quickly become all-consuming. The thrill of their secret meetings was tempered by an ever-present undercurrent of anxiety. The fear of discovery hung over her, adding a layer of intensity to their relationship. As summer wore on, Emily's interactions with Jake grew more frequent and passionate. They would steal moments together whenever Robert was away or busy with work. Their meetings took place in the privacy of Jake's house or in secluded spots around town, places where they could be alone without arousing suspicion. Each rendezvous was a blend of urgency and excitement, a temporary escape from the mundane reality that awaited them outside their stolen moments. One particularly warm August evening, Emily had managed to arrange a meeting with Jake under the pretense of needing help with some garden work. Robert had gone out for a late meeting with clients, leaving Emily free to indulge in her burgeoning affair. Jake arrived at her house just as the sun began to set, casting a golden glow over the garden. They worked side by side, exchanging flirtatious glances and light touches that spoke volumes. As dusk fell, Emily and Jake retreated to the secluded corner of the garden, hidden from the view of passing neighbors. The intimacy of the setting, combined with the warmth of the evening, made the atmosphere right for their growing attraction. They shared a passionate kiss that quickly escalated, and Emily's heart raced as they lost themselves in each other. Their moment of passion was abruptly interrupted by the sound of Robert's car pulling into the driveway. Emily's heart skipped a beat. In a panic, she shoved Jake away and scrambled to compose herself. Her mind raced as she hurriedly closed the gate to the garden and arranged the scene to appear normal. Jake, equally flustered, slipped away through a side gate just moments before Robert entered the house. Robert's arrival was accompanied by the usual sense of unease. He greeted Emily with a distracted smile, preoccupied with the day's events. Emily, struggling to keep her composure, engaged in small talk while her heart pounded in her chest. Every sound, every movement seemed amplified, heightening her paranoia that Robert might suspect something. As days turned into weeks, Emily's fear of discovery intensified. Robert's sporadic presence at home made it more challenging for her to manage her secret life. Every time Jake called or texted, Emily had to carefully craft excuses to avoid raising Robert's suspicions. The secrecy began to take a toll on her, fueling a growing sense of paranoia. Jake, feeling increasingly unsettled by the constant secrecy and the emotional distance he perceived in Emily, became more possessive and demanding. He wanted reassurance that their relationship was more than just an illicit affair. The emotional strain of hiding their connection weighed heavily on both of them, and their interactions became fraught with tension. One evening, Jake, unable to contain his frustration, confronted Emily about the state of their relationship. They met at a secluded park under the cover of darkness. The moonlight illuminated their faces as they argued passionately. Jake's jealousy was palpable, and he accused Emily of being emotionally distant and detached. Emily, overwhelmed by his accusations and her own guilt, tried to calm him down, but the confrontation only deepened their sense of impending doom. The argument reached a boiling point when Jake, in a moment of irrationality, suggested that they could no longer continue their affair if Emily wasn't willing to fully commit to him. Emily's heart ached at the thought of losing him, but she also feared the consequences of any further indiscretions. Their fight ended with a tearful embrace, but the emotional toll lingered, leaving Emily even more anxious about the stability of her double life. The following week, Emily was almost caught by Robert during a surprise visit from Jake. Robert had decided to come home early from work to surprise Emily with a romantic dinner. As he walked in, he found her in the midst of a frantic attempt to hide evidence of Jake's visit. She had to quickly stash away a collection of intimate items and feign surprise at Robert's unexpected arrival. Their dinner was strained, with Emily's mind racing as she tried to keep up appearances. Robert's presence, once a source of stability, had become a source of constant anxiety. Emily's attempts to act normal were undermined by her own nervousness, and the evening ended with a sense of relief mixed with residual guilt. The strain of their affair began to seep into other aspects of Emily's life. She became increasingly irritable with her children and friends, her previously flawless demeanor cracking under the pressure. The hidden nature of her relationship with Jake made every interaction feel like a tightrope walk, with each misstep threatening to expose their secret. The pressure reached a breaking point one evening when Emily and Jake, desperate for a moment of privacy, arranged a meeting at a nearby abandoned house that Jake had found. The location offered a secluded refuge, but it also carried its own risks. As they settled into the abandoned space, they were interrupted by the sound of approaching footsteps. The tension in the air was palpable as Emily and Jake scrambled to hide, their hearts racing as they listened to the footsteps drawing closer. The intruders turned out to be a group of local teenagers exploring the abandoned house. Emily and Jake's hearts slowly returned to normal as they waited in the shadows until the teenagers left. The close call served as a harsh reminder of the precariousness of their situation. The thrill of their secret meetings was increasingly overshadowed by the constant fear of being discovered. In the weeks that followed, the emotional strain on Emily and Jake grew more intense. Their moments of passion were increasingly tinged with anxiety, and the secrecy of their relationship began to wear on them. The balance between excitement and fear became more fragile, and the ever-present threat of discovery loomed larger than ever. Emily's life continued to unravel as she struggled to maintain the facade of normalcy while navigating the treacherous waters of her affair with Jake. The constant tension and emotional upheaval took their toll, and the illusion of perfection that once defined her life was slowly giving way to a reality fraught with danger and deceit. The breaking point seemed imminent, and the consequences of their actions promised to be both dramatic and far-reaching. The summer sun was beginning to set, casting long shadows over the suburbs of Oakwood. Emily Carter was running on a tightrope, balancing her increasingly volatile relationship with Jake Thompson against the backdrop of her crumbling domestic life. The mounting pressure of maintaining the facade of normalcy was wearing on her, and she could sense that both her emotional state and her relationship with Jake were reaching a breaking point. That evening, the tension between Emily and Jake was palpable. They had arranged to meet at a secluded, abandoned house that Jake had found on the outskirts of town, a place that had become their secret refuge. But as they arrived, it was clear that the emotional strain had taken its toll on both of them. Jake was more agitated than usual, his frustration simmering beneath the surface. Emily, equally frazzled, was struggling to keep her emotions in check. The house was dimly lit by the fading light of dusk, its interior dusty and neglected. Emily and Jake entered, their footsteps echoing in the empty space. They began to talk, their conversation quickly escalating into a heated argument. Jake's frustration was mounting, fueled by the secrecy of their affair and the constant fear of discovery. He had been pushing for a more serious commitment from Emily, but her reluctance to fully abandon her life with Robert only added to his anger. "You don't understand how hard this is for me," Jake said, his voice rising. "I'm always hiding, always on edge. I need to know what this is for us, or I can't keep doing this." Emily, feeling cornered and defensive, tried to explain her position. "It's not that I don't care about you, Jake. But this isn't something I can just walk away from without thinking about the consequences. There's a lot at stake here." Their argument became more heated, their voices echoing off the walls. In a moment of blind frustration, Jake slammed his fist against a nearby table, sending a glass vase crashing to the floor. The sound reverberated through the empty house, and Emily's heart raced with a mix of fear and panic. As the argument continued, Jake's anger reached a boiling point. He began to accuse Emily of being unfaithful, even suggesting that she was using him for excitement while stringing him along. His accusations were fueled by jealousy and a growing sense of betrayal. Emily, overwhelmed and desperate to defuse the situation, attempted to calm him down, but her words only seemed to escalate his rage. In a moment of uncontrolled fury, Jake shoved Emily against the wall. Emily, caught off guard, stumbled and fell to the floor. As she tried to get up, Jake, in a blind rage, grabbed a nearby heavy object, a cast iron candle holder that had been left behind by the previous occupants. He raised it above his head, his face contorted with anger. Emily, realizing the imminent danger, scrambled to her feet and attempted to back away. Her pleas for Jake to calm down were drowned out by the intensity of his emotions. In a swift, irrational motion, Jake swung the candle holder, and it struck Emily's husband, Robert, who had unexpectedly arrived at the abandoned house after having received a mysterious tip from a concerned neighbor about Emily's whereabouts. Robert's appearance was sudden and shocking. He had been searching for Emily after noticing her prolonged absence, and his unexpected arrival only fueled the chaos. The candle holder struck Robert with a sickening thud, sending him crashing to the floor, bleeding and unconscious. Emily's world shattered in an instant. She stared in horror at the scene before her, her mind racing as she processed the brutal reality of what had just happened. Jake stood frozen, his anger giving way to a horrified realization of what he had done. The gravity of the situation hit him like a tidal wave, and he staggered back, his face pale and his hands trembling. Emily, overcome with shock and panic, tried to assess Robert's condition. The sight of her husband lying motionless on the floor was overwhelming. She knew she had to act quickly to avoid being implicated in the incident. With trembling hands, she tried to stop the bleeding from Robert's head wound, but it was clear that the damage was severe. Desperate to cover their tracks, Emily and Jake quickly devised a plan. They would stage the scene to look like a tragic accident. Emily grabbed a bottle of cleaning fluid from her bag and began to wipe down the area, removing any evidence of their presence. Jake, still in a state of shock, helped her as best as he could. The two of them worked frantically, their movements hurried and clumsy. Emily's mind was racing as she tried to piece together a plausible story for how Robert had ended up in the abandoned house. They hastily cleaned the area, trying to erase any trace of the confrontation. When they finished, Emily made a panicked phone call to 911, reporting that Robert had been found injured. The arrival of emergency services was a blur. Paramedics rushed to Robert's side, but it was too late. The injuries he had sustained were fatal, and he was pronounced dead at the scene. Emily and Jake, their hearts pounding, watched as the authorities began their investigation. The initial chaos of the scene was soon replaced by the methodical process of gathering evidence and interviewing witnesses. As the investigation unfolded, the authorities quickly focused on Emily and Jake. Emily's inconsistent statements and the suspicious circumstances surrounding Robert's death drew scrutiny. The forensic evidence, although carefully hidden, was not entirely foolproof. The bloodstains and the signs of a violent struggle pointed toward a confrontation, and Jake's fingerprints were found on the candle holder used as the weapon. The investigation revealed a web of lies and deceit. Emily's affair with Jake was uncovered, and the authorities began to piece together the motive behind Robert's murder. The evidence painted a clear picture of a tumultuous relationship marked by jealousy and violence. Jake was charged with manslaughter, and Emily was implicated as an accessory to the crime. The trial was a media sensation. The details of the affair and the violent confrontation were laid bare for the public to see. The courtroom was filled with a mix of shock and outrage as the story unfolded. Emily and Jake's testimonies were fraught with emotion, their attempts to justify their actions only serving to deepen the sense of tragedy surrounding the case. In the end, Jake was convicted of manslaughter and sentenced to 20 years in prison. His youthful promise and the potential for a bright future were overshadowed by the violence of that fateful evening. Emily was found guilty of conspiracy and obstruction of justice, receiving a sentence of 10 years. The consequences of their actions were harsh and unrelenting, leaving them to grapple with the aftermath of their choices. As the dust settled, Oakwood was left to pick up the pieces from the shocking events that had unfolded.